Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good afternoon and welcome to Native News Today. I'm your host, Jason Salzman. We have a special edition of the show for you this week. Anybody that's followed the Creek Nation over the last few years knows that we have had our issues with the Poarch Band of Creek Indians in Alabama regarding our ceremonial ground, Hickory Ground. Now, in conjunction with the Muskogee Nation News, we recently did interviews with Principal Chief James Floyd and Mekko of Hickory Ground, George Thompson, regarding some recent developments in this issue with the Poarch Band. And it was online. We got a lot of views on those interviews, so we wanted to bring you a special edition of Native News Today where we not only show you those interviews, but we bring you up to speed on the issues at hand with the Poarch Band of Creek Indians. According to their website, the Poarch Band of Creek Indians are descendants from the Muskogee Creek Nation who were not removed from their tribal lands in Alabama. The website states that these families were allowed to keep their land because they had provided services to the U.S. government. Some of the families received land grants in Alabama through a special act in Congress in 1836. The tribe was recognized by the U.S. government in 1984, becoming the only federally recognized tribe in Alabama. Over 229 acres of land were taken into trust for the tribe and declared a reservation in 1985. Part of the land owned includes the former MCN capital and ceremonial ground of Ogiobova, also known as Hickory Ground. According to a 1980 proposal to the Alabama Historical Commission, acquisition of the property is principally a protection measure. Acquisition will prevent development on the property. The ceremonial site also includes a number of burials that could be ancestors of Muskogee Creek citizens. According to previous media coverage, MCN filed suit against the Poarch Band in 2012 for allegedly removing 57 sets of human remains and continuing construction on a casino on the Hickory Ground site located near Wetumpka, Alabama. The court case is still pending. A U.S. House of Representatives resolution proposed June 15th seeks to reaffirm the trust status of land owned by the Poarch Band, potentially damaging the suit against PCBI brought by MCN. H.R. 5486 could override the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Carcieri v. Salazar, which states the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs can only place land into trust for tribes who were recognized by 1934. Muskogee Media contacted Cherokee Nation citizen and U.S. Representative Mark Wayne Mullen June 22nd for comment. His press secretary stated he was unable to provide an interview or statement by the press deadline. Muskogee Media contacted the Poarch Band and U.S. Representative Tom Cole June 22nd and did not receive a response by press time. Cole, a Chickasaw citizen, signed on as co-sponsor of this resolution on July 6th. The resolution has been referred to the House Committee on Natural Resources for review. The Indian, Insular, and Alaska Native Affairs Subcommittee has yet to schedule a hearing on the measure. Muskogee Media recently spoke with MCN Principal Chief James Floyd for his thoughts as it pertains to the Poarch Band issue.
Well, as we speak at this date, we essentially have two things that are a matter of discussion regarding the Poarch that's official. One is the introduction of H.R. 5486 a week ago. And the second is a legal dispute, which is in federal court between the Muskogee Creek Nation and the Poarch Band of Creek Indians.
So talk about what this bill is, what it aims to do, and what our position is on it.
H.R. 5486 was introduced in the House, I believe, on June 17th or 15th, and was introduced by the Congress member who represents the district that the Poarch Band's headquarters is located. So the intent of the legislation is stated very succinctly right in the subject, is the Poarch Band, it's intended to reaffirm the trust status of parcels of land of the Poarch Band Creek Indians. I think is how it's listed. It lists about, I think, several hundred parcels of land. And so we took interest for several reasons. One is that as a nation, Muskogee Creek Nation, along with the Hickory ground and Mekko Thompson, as the Mekko of that ground and the leader, we've gone to Congress earlier this year, February 2016, met with members of Congress, met with staff, met with the chairs of the presiding House and Senate committees that would oversee legislation regarding this carcieri fix. And our position was, if this bill is reopened, and I believe there's been several, at least 3 attempts to revise this bill, that if it's introduced again, our position is there needs to be a fix that would incorporate the resolution of issues of all tribes across the nation, across the United States, including Muskogee Creek Nation. So we've been consistent with that since this year, since I've been in office, and our letter that we mailed off earlier today to Chairman Rob Bishop and others in Congress restates that. So in relationship to the bill 5486, it's a one tribe, one fix solution, disregarding the interests of all other tribes of the country. And we oppose that.
What is our position and thoughts on the carcieri fix that has been added to the appropriations bill for 2017?
Okay, there's several elements regarding carcieri and our interests as a tribe and the 2017 appropriations bill. First is parcels of the land that's identified in 5486 include the Hickory ground parcel. So if the carcieri law is going to be reopened through this bill, we want to be at the table because that is our traditional land. It's the traditional land. It's the last capital of Muskogee Creek Nation before we came west. We left that forcibly. As the Poarch Creek were recognized, we entrusted them to maintain that for perpetuity. And history shows not only did they not do that, but they destroyed the Hickory ground, unearthed remains, burial objects, and others, have shown no remorse, and now want to take it one step further in 5486 and have it forever be entrusted to them without the input of any other tribe across the United States. So where it may be seen as a single fix for one tribe, the ultimate effect is impact upon the Muskogee Creek Nation and others across the United States who are left waiting for some type of resolution for our issues, which our issues are tied to the porch ban. With the introduction of 5486 in the House, the ultimate path that they're taking is to have this included either as an amendment or an administrative insert into the 2017 Interior Appropriation Bill, which funds the Bureau of Indian Affairs and other programs, so that as money is appropriated for 2017, this becomes a matter of law, and then it's done.
Do you think by adding this fix to the appropriations bill that it's more likely to be overlooked amongst some of the bigger items that would be in that bill and therefore more likely passed?
I would speculate this being an election year, with lots of bills incomplete at this time, there's a lot of moving parts in Congress. So easily this could be inserted into that mix and be overlooked by tribes across the nation and slip through unnoticed. We hope that doesn't occur. We've now gone on record opposing H.R. 5486 and asking that we be at the table if there's any hearing, so we can have our statements on record with our opinions, our views of this law, so that we can go back to the basic principles that we talked about earlier, that there must be, if carciere is going to be amended, it must be a fix for all the tribes across the country, and that would include us.
What steps are we taking to make sure our voice is heard?
Today, Muskogee Creek Nation, as principal chief, and with Mekko Thompson, George Thompson, who's the Mekko, the Hickory ground, ceremonial ground, we co-signed a letter that went to members of Congress restating our opposition, first of all, our principles regarding carciere and the porch ban, and our opposition to H.R. 5486, to show that within our nation, both as a government entity and a ceremonial ground, that we're together in our opposition of this bill. And that's the most direct avenue that we have to approach our elected representatives. Second, we will raise this at the National Congress of American Indians and any other national organization to make sure that they hear and understand our opposition to H.R. 5486. I believe that why Muskogee Creek Nation is so concerned about this law is that the parcels of property are original land occupied by our ancestors. And I believe that beyond a leader of the tribe, we have the absolute responsibility to make sure that's preserved, to make sure that even if possible, that it be returned to us, so that if they can't be stewards of this property, that we uphold our traditional responsibility for thousands of years and keep that land intact and preserve it.
What is our status? What's the status of the lawsuit that we have concerning the Hickory ground issue?
As I understand it, the progress of the legal action against porch ban is pending in federal court, as it has been, I believe, for several years. We will continue to be active in that case and try our best to push that toward a resolution and hope that it gets resolved soon. So we will continue the approach through the legal system as we will through the legislative process that we've been talking about in the last few minutes. Those are the two strongest ways that we can affect this directly. We will also continue to communicate and provide information to groups of tribes, tribal members, and interested third parties of the Hickory ground to make sure that they voice their opposition to this, because they're very ardent, staunch supporters of Mekko Thompson and the Hickory ground people having control over that land again, or making sure that we get answers to the status of their ancestors that we do not have answers to at the present time.
Have we received any type of response regarding our questions on the Hickory Ground issue from the Poarch Band?
To my knowledge, which only goes back half a year now, I've not received anything in return to any inquiries that the Muskogee Creek Nation has had from the Poarch Band.
By placing the lawsuit and by not supporting the House resolution, what type of fix would we prefer? Do we want the land to come to us, or do we just want our questions answered?
We are seeking both answers. One, legislatively, we feel that with less than 6 months left in the legislative calendar, and knowing that this is an election year and there are very few legislative days remaining, that there is not time right now to adequately and sufficiently get all the views of the tribes on record to have a successful carcieri fix. So that's one of the reasons for our opposition. And meanwhile, we will continue to pursue our legal remedies for this. Our fear is that should carcieri fix for the Poarch Creek ban become law, it would render our lawsuit moot. And thus, we, again, would be left with no answers, no resolution. And, if we're a tribe of 82,000 members, that is not acceptable.
Does that open up the possibility for another suit if this passes through Congress?
We would have to address future actions once we see the outcome here in the next few weeks and months. But believe me, we will be very active in the coming months to assure that we're doing everything that we possibly can for our people, the remains of our ancestors, protection of our lands, and the protection of lands of all tribes. Because I'm sitting here today representing Muskogee Creek Nation, but there's no guarantee that tomorrow same thing could happen for another tribe. We know how painful that is. We do not want any tribe to go through that in the future.
Will this be one of the resolutions proposed at the 5 Civilized Tribes meeting here in July, do you think?
I'm sure the 5 tribes and the Intertribal Council will discuss this matter, take a position on this matter. We're working as we speak to ensure that that's on the agenda for us to discuss.
Is there anything else that you think is important to this story?
We would hope that we'd be sitting here talking about something much different, that had this been a bill that had wider reach and inclusion of other tribes, we'd be sitting here having a different discussion. But it's unfortunate that one group wants to proceed and get their resolution above any other tribe in the United States. So 566 other tribes have no remedy. And I think that's going to be unacceptable for a great majority of the nations across the country.
Muskogee Media also spoke with Hickory Ground Mekko George Thompson on his thoughts as it pertains to the recent developments.
We became involved with the issue back in 2006. And the way it came about was my wife and I were getting ready for our ceremonies like the next day. And word came down to me that this issue had came up. And it was a enormous challenge, because all we are is just a ceremonial ground was carrying on our traditions. And we weren't involved in a political arena, so to speak. So that was a big challenge. And one of the things that gave me the incentive to take up the issue was to I thought about my ancestors. You know, I've heard that through my mother and the elders that our old homelands back in Alabama. So that gave me the incentive that the remains that were being disturbed could be my grandparents. And as of today, I have a 93 or 94-year-old uncle that's good in mind. Tells me that his grandparents buried there. But since desecration took place, all the remains were taken out. And as of today, we don't know where they're located or how that repatriation took place. Usually in the regulations that the remains and the artifacts are supposed to put back in the same as where they were excavated from. And a few years ago, our Creek Nation, I guess you would call them anthropologists, but anyway, they were working hand in hand with the Poarch's, I'll just state his name, Robert Tripp. They were working hand in hand, and all of a sudden we lost contact from them. And not too long after that, they were getting ready to repatriate. It's like 2 days' notice, you know. And so we never got to be part of that.
Have you had any conversations with tribal leaders in Alabama in regards to Hickory Ground?
The very last time I had conversation with the leaders was, I don't exactly remember what year it was, 2007, I would say. And that was the last meeting I had with the chairman. And back then, the grounds, you know, had been desecrated, but there was no buildings on there except for the parking garage. That's all there was. So on the last day of the meeting, I had several council members there with me, plus our attorney. And Poarch Band chairman asked me what my wishes were. And my reply was to put the remains where you excavated from and let it go back to nature. Let the land go back to nature. Because back then there was no buildings or anything. And all I had to do was rebury the remains where they got them and let it go at that. And he didn't take that too well. So that's probably the last contact I had with him.
Describe your emotions in learning about this resolution that's up before the House of Representatives currently.
Mm-hmm. On that part, a lot of our nations all across the U.S., Indian nations, because they are going through this process of sacred place desecration. And to me, Hick Run has to be the number one, example of what took place. And it was not our choice to leave our remains, our ancestors. So when something like that, it's supposed to be there for forever. It's their final resting place. But to hear something where the remains had been dug up was hard to take, because that's could have been my my very own ancestors, my grandpas.
What do you want Muskogee citizens to know about this issue and Hickory Ground?
I would like for the people to know that there are several tribal towns still located in Alabama. And it just so happens that one day these other tribal towns could face the same issue that we are facing today.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
In closing, I would like to give my appreciation for our principal chief, our second chief, the council members for coming on board. That gives you the incentive to fight this thing. Like saying involved with ceremonial grounds, we're not in a political arena. So we need a lot of help there, and that's why I extend my appreciation to these people.
And that'll wrap us up for this special edition of Native News Today. I want to thank you folks out there. I know that was a lengthy piece there, but we really felt the need to include it in the episode of Native News Today. Our online viewers had a chance to see those interviews, but not the television audience yet. So stay with us here at Native News Today, Muskogee Media, for any further developments in this issue. Also, just stay with us in general. We've got a lot of news coming out in the future. So right here on Native News Today, you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.